Welcome back. Now, for many, if Nigeria does not start walking the talk regarding her infrastructure development, the country may run into a serious crisis in the near future. With a population expected to hit 397 million by 2050, Nigeria's infrastructure will come under huge pressure, hinder economic development, and deny citizens of the much desired national prosperity, except something drastic is done. Now, what are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And as the country prepares for the general election, what is expected from the new administration as regards infrastructure development? Well, I'm being joined via Skype by the Director, Center for Infrastructure Policy, Regulation and Advancement at the Lagos Business School, Dr. Bongo Hadi. Good morning, Dr. Hadi. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Chimeze. It's good to be here.
So let's start. What is your take on the state of infrastructure in Nigeria?
Well, I think we've been on this almost forever. Let's look at the infrastructure stuff. By 2012, when the National Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan produced by the previous administration, our infrastructure stock, yes, as a proportion of the GDP was valued then at about 20 to 25%. Now, which is very low, below the 70% benchmark suggested by the World Bank to have, a growing, sustainable economy. But that means we were almost 50% below the World Bank benchmark of 70%. Now, compare that to our next, competing economy in Africa, which is South Africa. South Africa's infrastructure stock, as at that time, corresponding period, was about 86% of their GDP, which was actually better than so many countries in Europe, and even better than the United States, which was a little below 70%. Now, last June, there was this report that shows that our infrastructure stock had grown to about 35% of our GDP. Anyway, I would say that is because of the small improvement that we've registered in the power sector over the period. But the story of infrastructure in Nigeria is still a very sad one. Underinvested in infrastructure. We have a dismal record when it comes to social infrastructure. By social infrastructure, the schools, the health, and all that social services. So the record of the country in infrastructure investment is woeful at best.
Okay, now, what are the major challenges of infrastructure development in Nigeria? Where are we getting it all wrong?
The first, anyway, if you listen to, the leaders, the policymakers, either you're talking to the director of ICRC, Mr. Engineer Chidu Izowa, or you are talking to some of the people in the pension funds, they will tell you that the challenge of infrastructure in Nigeria today is not finance. And that is contrary to what so many people believe. It's not a problem of money. In fact, at the last economic summit, the Minister for Works and Housing, Power, Works and Housing was there. And the Minister of Transport was also there during the infrastructure breakout session. Okay, they made it look like investing in infrastructure still is constrained by funds. But, from the same government, so we also have this contradictory, view that the problem of infrastructure investment in Nigeria is not fund, it's not finance. So we have about 8 trillion pension funds. I know that the pension funds are guided by government policies regarding what to do with the money. But again, when we look at institutional investors in infrastructure, I think the South African pension fund remains very significant, even in Nigeria. So they tell you that they have money, the pension funds, the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund as well. They said that are awash with funds. They are now looking for where to invest it. So the problem is that they are not finding bankable projects. And then there is also this, conception that government is not willing yet to privatize infrastructure, to bring in the competence and the technical capacity of the private sector to providing and managing infrastructure assets in Nigeria. So I think that is where the problem is. There is still a lack of political will to go the full hog when it comes to infrastructure provision and development in Nigeria.
All right, let's look at the 2019-2021 medium-term expenditure framework that was recently released. It shows a budget estimate for 2019 at 8.73 trillion naira is against 9.12 trillion naira from 2018. Now, does this give you a concern for worry about capital expenditure, particularly as government struggles to ramp up revenue?
Yes, again, the reason why experts keep calling on the government to look towards PPP, private partnership, as a better way to provide infrastructure. Okay? Now, remember what I said, the problem of infrastructure is not, but because of the unwillingness of the government to let go, so it begins to look like the problem is one. So when we look at the global body, because it's insignificant, it can't really do much when it comes to the level of infrastructure deficit we have in Nigeria today. So meaning that there is no way the government can take the load. The capacity of the private sector has to be tapped into, to be harnessed, but it has not happened. At the last economic summit in 2017, it was also brought up. There is this lack of harmony in synchronicity between the DPE and the ICS. So experts also they also spoke about several legal constraints to infrastructure investment in Nigeria. Those are the things that the government can deal with at the policy level to create an enabling environment for the private sector to step into the infrastructure deficit, because it is very clear that government cannot do it. Government lacks the capacity to handle it. Government lacks capacity in PPPs, but the private sector in Nigeria, I think, have what it not only in Nigeria, but if the environment is good, you see, and incentivize it enough, of course, the international investors are also out there in towards Nigeria. But given the situation of things right now, I think that we have given them the right incentive to fund.
We've seen Nigeria, always borrow to fund its budget deficit. Is this a sustainable means of funding the budget?
Well, it is not anyway, because we have experience of high debt when we are a very highly indebted country. The government of the day in 2005 worked very hard to get us off that. But it looks like we are going back to that direction in this age and time. Of course, nobody will support that. But again, like I said, if there is no political willingness to deregulate key aspects of the economy, especially when it comes to infrastructure assets, government will find itself pressed to find money to execute its budget. And that is what keeps increasing the debt profile and leading to this high, deficit budget. It shouldn't actually be that way if government is interested in bringing in the expertise and the finance coming from the private sector.
Now, in all of these infrastructure issues, you are the director of CIPRA at Lagos Business School. What exactly is the role of CIPRA in perhaps advising the government in which way to go in terms of developing the infrastructure facilities?
Yeah, we played a very significant role bringing together all the critical stakeholders in infrastructure. CIPRA started operation in 2012 when it was established at the Lagos Business School to, be, the, will I say, the clearinghouse for infrastructure development knowledge. We produce research. We engage with stakeholders to find better ways to provide, finance, and manage the critical infrastructure assets of the country. So we've been doing that, and we have regular programs through which we bring in the expertise, not just within LBS, but within the Nigerian infrastructure space to educate key policymakers, both private sector and public sector, on the best ways to manage public-private partnership as well as project finance. So we've been very active, in that role. But again, we've also realized that because Lagos Business School is private sector driven, it's never very easy to work with the government because there is always that misalignment in terms of incentive. That has been the critical challenge that we are facing. So we still we keep what we're doing and hoping that we find ways out of deficit.
Now, Dr. Bongo, just before I let you go, the critical infrastructure gap cuts across all segments of the economy and the environment. Now that Nigeria is preparing for another election and soon a new administration will come in, what sectors of the economy do you think need urgent attention?
I didn't get that clearly.
Yeah, I'm asking that, as in, what do you expect from the incoming administration after the election? What sector of the economy needs urgent attention?
We are still on the same thing. Power. Power is the biggest constraint, to productivity in Nigeria today.
What about the road infrastructure?
Power and transportation, yes, power. But first, let's talk about power. Okay. Now, the problem with power is that each time we go above 5,000 megawatts per day, now the wheeling of that becomes a very big problem because there are still so much constraints with transmission in Nigeria. And then, yes, there has been so much said about this. So it's actually turned into rhetoric, but we've not seen much action on that. So the incoming administration, whether the continuance of this current administration or a new government that's going to come in next year, needs to prioritize investment in those key infrastructure assets, power and transportation. The road network in Nigeria, yes, we may say that our infrastructure stock has gone to 35% of GDP from 25% as of 2012. Yet, we can see that the road infrastructure has been in gradual decline over the time period. Look at the axis connecting roads to the ports of the country, the eastern ports in Calabar, in River State. The connecting roads are in very horrible situations. And then we look at the key market and commercial cities that we have in Nigeria as well. The connecting road networks are also in very horrible shape as we speak. In fact, so many expressways in the eastern part of Nigeria are impassable as we speak. So there is need to ramp up investment in infrastructure. Otherwise, it's going to create, the negative multiplier effect in terms of poverty, underdevelopment, and suffering for our people.
The African Development Bank recently said it would assist the Nigerian government to bridge its infrastructure gap, estimated to cost about $3 trillion in the next 26 years. How can the government leverage opportunities such as this to solve its infrastructure problem?
Well, again, it still goes to what I was talking about, bringing in, it's not the government that's going to use that money directly because we've seen the track record of the government in doing that. It is not convincing enough. So it is about creating the enabling environment to incentivize and attract the private sector to leverage such funding schemes coming from multilateral agencies to invest in infrastructure in Nigeria. It is not what the government can do. We have seen the government does not have what it takes to do that. Yes, from a socially point of view, public infrastructure is supposed to be the domain of the government, what the government should do. But given the situation that we face, government's lack of capacity and the political constraints, we feel, and also the track record that we've seen, the little privatization that's been done in Nigeria, we think that private sector, public-private partnership specifically, is best placed to handle the infrastructure problem that we have, not just in Nigeria, but I think in Africa at large.
All right, thank you, Dr. Adi, for your time. Dr. Bongo Adi is the Director, Center for Infrastructure Policy, Regulation and Advancement at the Lagos Business School. We'll take another short break, and when we come back, the federal government looks to privatize some redundant state-owned enterprises. To stay with us.